Tamara Vrooman, our guest, she's the CEO of VanCity Credit Union, and your balance sheet is how much?
16 billion.
16 billion.
That's right.
Big numbers.
Yeah, they are big numbers.
Hello.
Yeah, they are, particularly when you think that we're local. So that represents a lot of wealth in our community. So we have about 475,000 members. So if you think there's about 2 million people in Metro Vancouver. So we have a reasonable percentage of our community does business with us.
So when you put ethical in there, sustainable in there, and somebody comes to you, wants some venture capital, and they want to invest in a gold mine or something, or start a gold mine, do you do the math on that and say, okay, are you going to do this sustainably?
Yeah, we do.
Is it that particular?
We have something called an ethical policy, and it's posted on our website. We're very transparent about it. We're actually just updating it at the moment because we find, you know, with the oil sands and things, there's issues that we need to stay on top of. But yeah, we like to encourage businesses that we think are sustainable, but also are less risky. You know, over time we found that businesses that keep pace with environmental regulation, work well with Aboriginal people if they happen to be in the resource sector, treat their employees well, they do better in the long run. So it's not just the ethical thing to do. We think it's actually the financial sustainable.
Well, that's interesting because I had an ethical investment expert on recently, and he said, believe it or not, you can make a lot of money in ethical investments. Somebody said, that's an oxymoron. Forget it. It's like a sustainable bank. Forget it. But the operative word at the credit union is sustainable.
Absolutely, in all senses of that word. Right.
And is that why you're carbon neutral?
It is. It is one of the reasons.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what that means is we are a financial institution, so we're not. It's not like we're a pulp mill or anything. So we do have a reasonably light footprint to start with, but we are a big employer. You know, we have 2,400 staff and 59 branches. So we looked at things like employee travel, our paper usage, and we thought, how can we really lighten our contribution to carbon in our community? So we took it upon ourselves to be carbon neutral. By 2008, we achieved that a year early in 2007. And if you go into one of our offices, you'll see that the garbage can in everybody's office is about this big, and the recycling bin is about this big, to make the point that very little actually goes into the landfill. Almost everything we produce can be recycled.
How great. And I'm sure many of the banks are going green, the charter banks are going green, and all of it. It's going, corporations are trying to go green. Some are better at it than others.
Yeah, and I think that's because society is demanding that of us. Right?
So the gospel of good banking is what, really, today? The gospel of the credit union. Sustainable, makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to get a car loan.
Yeah.
I come to you.
Yeah.
How different would it be if I went to the bank? Or is it different?
Yeah.
Interest rate-wise, charge-wise?
We have very competitive rates and fees. So you definitely don't pay more by coming to the credit union. We do in the case of a car loan. That's a great example. If you're going to choose a car that fits with the Government of Canada's low emission targets, we'll give you a preferable rate on that car, trying to encourage people in the decisions that they need to make in their life. You know, they need a car to take their kids to school or whatever. They do it in a way that contributes to the benefit of the community and the environment.
Who taught you about managing money? Did you learn it in school? Did your parents give you an allowance and make you account for it?
No, I'm the eldest of 4 children, and both my parents always worked, come from a very sort of working class background. So money was always something that we paid attention to in my family, and I worked from a very young age, and I always wanted to be independent, and I saw managing my own money as a way to be independent.
Well, as you look at Canadians, apparently we are in debt.
We are.
Like big time, individually,
and
heavily in debt, and getting worse. 802 billion total debt, or something like that, like way up there. How are we going to get out of that? Individually, collectively?
Yeah. It's interesting, hey? When you take a look at what's happening in Canada and what's happening in the U.S., our debt levels have actually gone up over the last 3 years, and in the U.S. they've gone down. And most Canadians are surprised to hear that our debt burden is, you know, 140 to 1 as opposed to theirs, which is now about 125 to 1. That means for every dollar of equity we have $1.40 of debt.
And where's the fat?
Yeah, and where's the fat? And where that mostly, the good news is, where that mostly is coming from is not consumer debt, it's not credit card debt, it's housing debt. So what that really reflects is our housing affordability problem right across this country. And you hear the government, the Governor of the Bank of Canada and others worried about housing affordability. So what we need to do is we need to not, wait for another housing boom and hope that our personal balance sheets improve just because the value of our houses improve. We actually have to start finding ways that people can get into housing without taking on such big mortgages, and we obviously have to make sure that our incomes continue.
So you talk to any 30-year-old, 40-year-old, newly
tough,
married.
Tough.
It's tough, and they
tough.
plan to live downtown rent or, yes, in some kind of dense neighborhood in a tiny little spot if they can afford to buy at all.
Right, or they have to live 2 hours out. And they have to commute, which is not good for the quality of life. It's not good if you have to leave the house at 7 in the morning and you don't get home till 8 at night for family and personal reasons. It's definitely not good for the environment or traffic.
Right. So as we look at foreign investment coming in here and buying up the towers and many of the homes and all of that, which is injecting into our economy for sure, but it's also making this a very expensive place to live, I think. Or is that it?
It is an expensive place to live, but I think there's people in our community that are really starting to do some really creative work around that. So we're working with and have worked with some developers that are bringing, for example, in 60 West Cordova, which is right on the edge of Gastown and the downtown east side, right near the old, now new Woodward's building, where we took a site that was going to be actually written off because it had gone through some issues in the downturn, and we worked with a developer and worked with the city. They made some variance changes, got rid of the parking requirement because we don't want people to drive a car downtown anyway.
Right.
And we were able to bring a product on stream that you could afford to buy with a household income of $36,000 or less. When we checked, the last time you could buy a condo in the downtown area at that income level was about 27 years ago. So. We're looking at different ways. Yeah, they're smaller units, but things like parking,
exactly.
things like parking
and as
aren't
you
as
know,
important.
boomers retiring.
That's right.
And trying to downsize, not downgrade.
Yeah.
Michael Geller said to me, well, I'm building this structure on the other side of the pond so that you can downsize, not downgrade. And I thought, probably not in my lifetime. I think it's going to be downgrade. So how do we get there?
That's right. That's right. So there's all sorts of research being done on how we can bring more affordable product online, and I think there's some interesting things happening. We had in the early '80s co-op housing, and was really late '70s, early '80s was really big. Well, a lot of those co-op housing developments have kind of gone through the life cycle of the families that they served, and they're ripe for redevelopment. And so have we looked at co-op housing as a way to get young families and young people living closer?
And who's living in co-op housing, who should be living in co-op housing, and who shouldn't be living in co-op housing because they don't need co-op housing anymore.
And do we understand what co-op housing is? I think there's a
Not
stigma around co-op housing. That's right. But co-op housing was really just the first strata councils. Before we had strata councils, if you go to New York City or Manhattan, what do you see? You see co-ops.
Sure.
Because they didn't have the strata mechanism. So it just allows people to collectively own. And then they probably don't sell for the same appreciation, so you don't have the same upside, but it's much more affordable and accessible.
It's like the credit union, it's the co-op bank.
That's right. That's
sort of.
Yeah, and there's quite a few co-op housing developments in and around Vancouver. They tend to have low density, so they're ripe for redevelopment and sort of modernizing for today's homeowners' needs. And I think that's a real source of bringing some.
Yes, and many people stay there for many years. That wonderful building in the West End.
That's right, close to Stanley Park.
Close to Stanley Park, and it's one of the oldest buildings, and it's a co-op, and it's fabulous.
It's
modern and wonderful, just above the VanCity Grill there, or just beside it.
That's right.
So was there one thing then Finance Minister Carol Taylor told you to inspire you? I mean, when you said, guess what, I'm leaving the public service, the highest calling, to go to the credit union. Is there any advice she gave you?
Yeah, I learned a lot from Carol.
I bet you did.
But I think the thing that I learned most from her that stuck with me, and I observed she lived it every day that I worked with her, is she said, follow your own mind and your own instinct, and be true to yourself and be the same no matter what. So the Carol Taylor that you see on TV is the same Carol Taylor that would sit across the desk and
say
chat
hi,
with
girlfriend,
me, and the same one that would say hi to the secretary on the way in
exactly.
to meet the Prime
I know
Minister.
when she was first finance minister, I had her on the show, and she said, "Hi, girlfriend.
Yeah.
I like your hair."
Yeah.
I thought, you're the finance minister. You shouldn't be saying that.
But what was great is she was always the same, so she never had to worry about which Carol was, and she could focus on the things that really mattered, which are the decisions she had to make.
We're both a fan.
Yeah.
I thank you.
Thank you, Fanny.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Tamara Vrooman, CEO of Vancouver City, VanCity Credit Union.